Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Courageous Conversations. I'm your host, Laurabel Mba, and today, before I introduce you to my guest, I'm going to give a little bit of a preamble. So, this podcast is called Courageous Conversations, and when I started it, I was thinking of all the people in my world and the people that I know or have been creeping on social media that I think are pretty cool and are living their lives courageously, whether it's based on their identities and the perception the world has on them versus who they are, or the industries that they got into despite what people thought they were capable of, and all of that. And for today's guest, that person brings both of those parts together because not only are they courageous in what their profession they went into and they chose to do. But when life threw them a curveball, they have handled it with the most grace, authenticity to who they are as a person, and still stepped back into the world with their head held high and said, shit happens sometimes, but I'm still me and I'm still going to live the best life I know how to. So, without further ado, my guest for today is the one and only Deputy Mayor of Mount Pearl, Nicole Kieley. I got to meet Nicole through the wild way life works, and I get to do cool things
Yep.
in my day to day. And she was always one of the smiling faces I got to see around the city of Mount Pearl, who was always involved in things. And then I came to find out she was the deputy mayor, and I was like, oh, she's a woman in politics, and she's like top cheese. Okay, let's get to know her. And then sometimes life happens.
Mm.
And before, I'm not going to tell that story. I'm going to leave Nicole to share that part of her adventure with us. But before we get into that part, Nicole, politics, how'd you get there?
Ooh, first of all, thank you for having me, and thank you for the really cool introduction. That's it's always great to hear what some of the things I hope I try to inspire with authenticity, and to hear that comes through and just being me, it means a lot. How did I get here? So it it definitely, I would say the first thing that comes to mind, a picture literally, is me in the middle of July around a um, kitchen table that also would be a boardroom table at night at the St. John's Status Women Council, where I was a
Okay.
program coordinator, and I would be in a really hot room serving lunch and having incredible conversations with many of the women that would come, because first of all, it was great to have a free lunch. Many were really experiencing uh, a poverty, and also somewhere to socialize. And that's where I started. That's where politics kind of it's planted seeds in me around, well, there's an incredible amount of people out here that are experiencing some tremendous amount of trauma and barriers and social um, issues in their life. And um, those things, as somebody who, say, um, we're acutely dealing with them, pulling people out of, into safety, keeping people, who are very close to being either um, homeless, dealing with major landlord tenancy issues, and also trying to just find a healthy meal and to be healthy with such a limited budget. That um, those are the things that informed my politics and informed my my openness, curiosity, but also drive to deal with things not necessarily always at that level where you're literally pulling people out of some unsafe spaces, but knowing, okay, further down the line, further down, before somebody enters into a place where they are at risk of all of these things, what can we systemically deal with? What can we as a community come together and make places and policy changes, legislative changes, um, that will impact everyone? So that is definitely the place where I started because it informed not only like my need to find change in larger ways that will get people out of this in the first place, but it also really inspired me around resiliency. You'll never find a more courageous, resilient amount of individuals than I have through learning and talking and connecting to women specifically at that time, um, who have been through it and have experienced trauma and are living lives and being incredible people. And I learned so many lessons there. So that's where I began. Uh,
Okay. I'm gonna
yeah,
pause you for a second because I'm like, I think of my world and like I didn't know you were involved in the St. John Status of Women's Council. As someone who now sits
yeah.
on the board, I'm now even more excited that I get to be in
Yes.
spaces that you once were. So like, yay for a
Yeah.
second. Okay, and now we'll continue. So that's where I guess the spark was lit for you.
Yes,
You got to
100%.
you got to meet people, see their real situations, and you knew there was a room for systemic change, not just acute band-aid style
Exactly.
situations.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
And both
now
had to happen though, right? Both had to
absolutely.
happen. So when you think about like even municipal, provincial, and federal, municipally and even at that level of governance at a board level, you understand that we need like drop-in programs to happen. We need
Hmm.
things to happen where we are directly working with people that need that. I think about that municipally with parks and recreation, safety, senior programs,
Hmm.
community organizations that do that work. Um, and then when you think about work I've done at the provincial level, and I know that is happening at the federal level, you see those larger pieces, like it still stems through, but in a different way of, and more of a, like all of these need to happen at once, you know? Um, and that is something that we don't often think about. That it's like, well, this is that. It's all related, and it has to happen in a more of a, I think, an intersectional, comprehensive way, right? So I was
I
on
agree.
Military Road. I was at the Women's Center room. It was on Military Road, and it was that little house on the side there, and doing barbecues and doing drop in. And I was there for about 5 years, and I had the opportunity to be there while we were building Marguerite's Place, which was supportive housing for women in addition to the status of women and in addition to the Women's Center stuff, as you know. And it was a great way because we were visioning what that looked like, policy wise, service wise. And at the same time, that informed what we were doing at the council side when we talk about advocacy and what,
Hmm.
what we need to be doing when we are at tables that include ministers, cabinet ministers, at the provincial level or at the federal level, or even a mayor of that community or a deputy mayor of that community. I know that Sheila Larry has been really involved at all sorts of ways. Like I met Sheila actually at a drop-in center at the Women's Center at the very first time, and we talked about photography. So that's the other thing. A lot of these things are connected. We're a small
Yeah.
world here. Like that whole Newfoundland thing of like we're all just mini small towns. Sometimes it
Yeah.
is, especially if you're doing similar work around and you have similar goals around systemic change and feminist work. So, but we're just doing it differently in different spaces. And yeah, that's where it started, and it developed from there. I worked there as a program coordinator, and then I worked a very different job, but very, very essential around. I worked as the executive director with the Women Resource Development Corporation. So that's advancing women in non-traditional work. Uh,
Yes.
and so that really linked definitely our resource sector, corporate sector, and recognizing like the value of having diversity in a workforce or around a boardroom table. or within an organization. And there were some really interesting programs happening there at the educative level where we were doing like partnerships with MI and CNA, and but we were also working directly with the province around diversity planning and what that needs to look like, because that was a different sandbox, if you
Yeah.
will. However, it was a value of like we learned our lessons from knowing to advance women in these places, we first really need to mandate it,
Yeah.
right? We need to push. After that, I worked, it was about maybe 6 or 7 years, or I can't quite remember, but it was as the executive director of the Sexual Assault Center. And that expanded into, understanding trauma and resilience. And that literally, I never learned more lessons around resiliency than working directly with survivors, doing training myself, being a trainer. One of the things that I hold dearly in the heart was the opportunities to do uh, our crisis line training with our volunteers, um, enhance that along with staff, enhance what was there and develop it in a broader way that includes, I think, a lot more of the population and a more of an inclusive intersectional look at things. Um, and that, again, like that prepared me professionally and personally for my
Yeah.
road ahead and the journey I'm on with rehabilitation and recovery, the road I am on with moving from a form of a very intense acute experience of trauma,
Yeah.
and then understanding, when you're in the political side of things and not necessarily what sometimes feels like your feminist bubble, and
Yeah.
that's great. We need those feminist spaces to encourage ourselves, empower ourselves. However, sometimes it feels like we're preaching to the choir. And
Yeah.
so it's why we want to enter into larger spaces that have diversity of ideas and ideologies. And that's where you sometimes take your licks and you get backlash, or you need to learn how to um, collaborate and find common ground with individuals that may not necessarily agree with you.
Yeah.
So I think that whole experience of trauma and resiliency and understanding, like being able to be in the ring and understanding truly that there is strength in vulnerability, that it's okay to cry at a committee of the whole meeting. It's okay to cry at a public meeting if
Yeah.
it's emotional. Like, and it's also okay to be a strong, and you can find, I've got a lot to say around, I've got a lot to say around those sort of spaces and the
Yeah.
interactions between what we feel is not necessarily common to those spaces of being vulnerable,
Yeah.
but anytime that happens, I have seen the most transformative, powerful things emerge from that. Even if it's okay, as a colleague, I know you more and I can connect with you more when we share ourselves. Um, and it often brings about that opportunity for change and an opportunity to find, okay, well, let's work together on this. We may not agree on all parts, but um, we we have some things together, even at that emotional level, at personal level, or you find some sort of common ground to work with that. So, yeah, community absolutely has always informed my politics. Feminist work has, um, inclusion work, diversity work, whatever you want to call it, all of those sort of intersections has always informed my work. So, yeah,
So what
that's my
was it
heart.
like? It is. And like I look at all the places you've been, and not knowing that at some point that I've also been in those spaces. So it's really cool to know that I'm even more connected to you than
Yeah.
I thought I was. So I'm just gonna be like, okay, I might be as cool as Nicole Kieley one day. So it's
No,
fine. We're
you're
working
definitely cool.
towards that.
I love everything you're doing. This
Oh,
is like, oh, this is an honor to be a part of this. And I'm glad you're doing these sort of podcasts and creating more space for amazing, like I said, where it feels like, our past may not have been directly working with us, but
yeah,
you get the path and your own journey and how it relates to the things I'm talking about, which is that's
absolutely.
connection, right? And,
Absolutely.
yeah,
So,
our paths are going to look very different because we're different people. We bring
yeah,
different things to it. But I love it when you see that, yeah, there's some things that we are directly fundamentally connecting on, and it's finding those
absolutely.
great spaces, empowering ourselves within them, and yeah, finding what you need, taking what you need from those,
Absolutely.
and moving into those other spaces, you know?
So you figured out while you were in all these spaces, basically you figured out your advocacy, you figured out your desire for more systemic change, not just
Hmm.
acute solutions, but systemic change
Yeah,
so that it wasn't just band-aiding a situation, but creating further ripple effects. So you
that's
decided
right.
politics was going to be the thing. That
That's
was an
the
all boys
place.
club at
Oh,
one point.
that is the not like it is. It continues
So
to be. And
stepping
I
into that as a woman, like,
yeah.
Nicole, that's courageous. So, like, how have you balanced still being able to be vocal, to be vulnerable in a space that typically is said to be macho, bulldoze your way through it, and hasn't usually upheld feminist ideals?
So that hasn't always been great. And sometimes it's been great. I don't I also want to, and anyone will tell you this. I've had the opportunity to be very close to their organizations that directly work on this. Like I think of Equal Voice, provincially and
Mm-hmm.
federally, and we have some incredible women, criminal feminists working on that now. And a part of that is the balance of encouraging and empowering women to have what they need to go in these spaces. And we need it.
Absolutely.
As a province, we need it. There is something essentially like it lost in how we develop our policies and how we um, have real robust outcomes. And
Mm-hmm.
it's if we don't have those sort of perspectives of diversity and intersection, um, we're lost as so everyone, it's a win-win situation when we have more diversity at the table. No, like you look at studies, you look at like we're not the first people to be seeing this and breaking through. However, it's hard coming into those places and coming against sometimes that culture of machismo or culture of like again the way politics has to be. And especially when we're looking at a structure and a governance structure that was developed from a white colonial perspective, right? So
Mm-hmm.
even the structure itself is kind of hard because, if we were to start, like if we had white, like, no, we can't do that. But say, for instance, because
We could wipe it all clean.
we wipe it all clean, we would do it differently.
Absolutely.
However, that's not that's not reality.
No.
So, we're pretty much building the car as it's moving, if you will, because
Absolutely.
it has a structure. So we just got to continue to work on that. So we're going into a place that already has systemic issues, and then you may have individuals that are not informed and not educated, or frankly may not want to be. And to each his own. Um, and that's a whole new kind of uh, reality for individuals, is,
Mm-hmm.
for women coming in, because it can be a little bit of a shock.
Yep.
Uh, but at the same time, I think there are incredible, inspiring women and men and diverse genders and individuals within those spaces that you can
Yeah.
find. So that's the first thing, is to find your people, if you will. And there always are people. I've worked with
Absolutely.
incredible people who get it, and have had like side conversations of, I know this is where we're working and what have you, and and like, first of all, being kind of a great reality check of, isn't this like, should this be? Shouldn't we
Hmm.
change that? Have we had that lens there before? And they're there and they can kind of like help you, can I, get you in
Yeah.
your corner, get you the water you need to move on forward. So there are people there. You're not the only one, because sometimes frankly, anyone who's walking into say a very a room, an incredible room where they don't see themselves. They see the same individual over and over and again.
When it's
Aside
homogenous
for
looking.
one, yes, when it's very homogenous, you feel like, well, this is isolating. I
Absolutely.
don't feel as though, maybe I don't fit in. Maybe my thoughts are different. Maybe what I have to add to here is not where it's needed. And in fact, that's the time when you think of, that's why you're supposed to be there. Whatever
Absolutely.
whisper that is in you to say, stick it out, girls. Like, stay here. Listen, find your opportunities. Because there needs to be both change within and outside those circles. So the advocacy we do of recognizing and acknowledging places that are homogenous or colonial or harmful, that needs to be called out. At the
Absolutely.
same time, we need to have individuals within there working and understanding that and having that knowledge and working with what they have in tools, you know. And that's it. I have chosen in some ways to be working with tools that are generally used in a harmful way sometimes, or not necessarily it, but they're there. I'm going to pick them up and I'm going to use them. And, and what I mean by tools, it could be like the governance structure, it could be policies that don't necessarily have a gender diverse lens, or an inclusive lens, or a disability lens, and recognizing like, okay, well, how do we add, and we can't go back to the white, like the clean
Yeah.
slate and start from new. How do we fix that up then? To make it work, and at the very least have direct impact on people who need it right now. Because you got to think again back to where we start, which is
Basics.
the personal is
Yeah.
political.
Absolutely.
Like, that whole 70s movement of second wave feminism, and there's troubling in that, and I'm
Yes.
so
It's not
excited that people
perfect,
are trouble. It's not
but yeah.
perfect. But there's something about the concept of conscious raising and personal is political that
Absolutely.
is necessary right now. So I felt like I talked a lot at you there, and that
No,
is just a stream of consciousness, maybe
I'm
some.
here for the stream of consciousness. I'm here for you talking at me because there's so
Good.
much that I'm learning and listening, and that I hope those who get to hear this podcast and watch it get to take from it too. But it also, I think, is the best way to segue into the next aspect where you have been very, very courageous in a very public light
Hmm.
as well. So I'm not going to tell the story because it's not mine to tell. I will ask a
Yeah,
few
I
questions
thank you.
along the way, but do
Yes.
you want to share with us what happened and how you're sitting here
I
today?
absolutely. I am so excited that I'm sitting here today because, yeah, I was involved in a car accident that crushed my body initially.
Yeah.
Um, and it happened out of the blue. It
Hmm.
happened on a day that I was just like living my life, going out to for the long weekend, excited to be at the cabin, getting a few things you need, and then going on. And in that moment, uh, everything changed for me. And it was a day that there's things I did that I'm so thankful for that saved my life. There's parts of my body that saved my life. Like well, this is my newest and first tattoo. And it's a crow eating dog berries. I don't know what the real name of the berries are. I'm
We
not
know them as
horticulturist,
dogberries. They're
but
orange
dog
and
berries,
they're there.
exactly. Yeah. They're bitter taste, but like my grandmother loved them, my Nanny Kylie, and they just resemble like a tough, resilient. And I've got a crow there because that's my mom. She loved crows, and she's always with me, and she was with me that day. And and so what had happened is, like, for instance, I put my hand up, and while, not to get into detail, but like, I got a lot of scars on this. I almost lost my arm as well. Not a lot of people may know that, but that action saved my life because it protected my face and my head. Um, and there's things that people did in that moment that saved my life. It was actually the owner of Fogtown that was one of the people that kept me kind of conscious and checking in with me. And then there was first responders and everything else, and then I got on-site blood services that I needed, all of that. And then there was within the hospital where I was induced into a coma and had many surgeries that ended up saving my life as well. Um, and in those surgeries, it also was deemed that I needed a leg amputated. So it's my left above knee was amputated. All of this happened while I was asleep. And so what it felt like to me was this happened. And I I was okay and managed to move like forward from a whole hour of being conscious and going through that to waking up. So that was my experience. And that was when a new reality had set in. Well, first and foremost, I don't even know how to describe it, but um, it was an intense amount of feeling of joy and love for the people I saw in front of me. So it was my dad and my sister. Um, but even through that, there was people there. Someone very special to me, who is my ex-partner, who was incredibly in part of my care, Kevin. I remember him there holding my hands at some points. So it went from uh, not sure if like, having a moment where I was like, this might be it, like really thinking that, and to waking up and have survived that and being safe and being cared for in an ICU. And I had a doctor very kindly explain what happened to me because, there's a lot going on and you've
Yeah.
got a lot of medications to keep you from feeling pain. Zero
Yeah.
pain is a really incredible uh, policy and feeling when they talk about recovery. And that they were keeping me very pain-free and able to do what I needed to do. So I didn't really feel what was going on in my body. And so they explained that to me. And so since then, I've been on a journey of recovery and rehabilitation. It included, and then like many months of hospitalization. It also included a year of really just working on gaining things like not sleeping all day and being able to be healthy enough, strong enough for a prosthetic, being fit with a prosthetic, working with an amazing team at the Miller Center, uh, Anne and Penny and Rhonda and Doug. And these are the names of like, they're my family now, honestly, that worked on that. And so really my focus was on me for
Yeah.
a good period of time. And people think about it as like a bravery or a courage. And for a while, I was like, I'm just getting it done. I'm just dragging my arse out of bed and, laughing when I can, like being, like dark humor and calling out my sister or like watching a movie with dad, or, laughing about what's going on, in politics and keeping up the prize on all that sort of stuff. And it's now that I look back that it's like, no, there was more to that. There was something always feeling like not today. I don't want to do this today. This is too hard. And then there's something in you that does propel you forward. And so I should acknowledge and honor that was happening. But in the moments, you don't see it as a courageous act sometimes. And I think we all can identify with that, that it's like you look back and you're like, wow, whether it is I applied for that, or I'm doing that job, or I'm moving out of a depressive episode, all of those sort of things, where in the moment it just feels like you making a choice to say yes for yourself. But that is an act of courage, because there's a lot of reasons why it, it, people would nobody would at that moment tell me otherwise of why I need to be in bed, or why I don't want to move forward. Nobody would ever. So it was really about the choice I wanted to make, and what I wanted to see in my life, and how I wanted to live the rest of my life. And a part of that was, I knew, was happiness and joy and contentment. And a lot of that had to do with working out what I need to do versus what I wanted to do. And the need sometimes is pushing myself, recognizing sometimes that recovery is a process, it's not linear, that there's going to be setbacks. And whether I want to be there right now, and I want this to be all over, and I don't want to feel this pain today, or I don't want to feel this way today, what I need to do is honor what is going on, and what is best for my recovery and rehabilitation. So that's always a thing that I think anyone can take from a lesson on your work around politics, or your work around resiliency or courage, you know? Uh,
Oh, Nicole.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No, don't ever
I know, I'm trying to.
apologize.
I
Oh,
know.
I'm
It's
sitting
it's a reaction where
here.
you're like, I'm sorry, I don't want to make you cry. But
No,
it's the
I'm,
connection. I understand. I understand, because people, you get it, because
yeah,
we've all
I'm,
been in those moments, right? Yeah.
I'm sitting here, and I know when I invited you to do this podcast, I was like, "Yo, B, we'll chat for an hour," and that's not even going to be enough. And so I'm going to make the adult, executive, courageous decision and say, Nicole, I need you to willingly agree to do a part two to this because
Well, I'm on
I'm,
camera now. What are you gonna? No,
yeah,
I'm joking.
I'm
I
making.
would
We can
love
edit it all
to.
out. It's fine because I
I'd love
I want
to.
to explore this conversation in a whole new way than what I
Okay.
initially came in for what I thought it would be. Because I thought it would be just talking about how are you living courageously from here. But I think what I want to actually talk to you about is deeper than just the day to day of how you live in a
Yeah.
body that looks and feels different than what
Yeah.
it did before. But there's a whole other and mental aspect that I
Yes.
didn't really fully comprehend that you probably had to go through and that will probably resonate with a lot of people because trauma happens in very different ways for
It
very
does.
different individuals.
You know
But
it. You know
courage
it.
is a, I'm going to say universal, but that's not the word, but
Yeah.
universal as to how we opt into it for
It's something
ourselves.
that I think there's something
Yeah,
we all can connect with, you
absolutely.
know? It might be different things and examples or whatever, but there's a connection there. I agree with you. And I'd be honored, honestly.
Okay. Okay.
Uh and it's something I
So,
like to talk about. Yeah,
yeah.
I do,
Okay.
not always,
But
but I'm in a place where this helps. It's been mutually beneficial.
okay.
And yeah.
So for our audience watching, caption this as Nicole Kieley's Courageous Conversations Part 1. We're going to take a break.
Okay.
We're going to regroup. And we'll be back with a longer format and a longer episode where we're going to explore this idea of courage in a whole new way. So sit back,
Wow.
relax, and know we're coming back with a part two. Get your tissues ready too, because like I'm gonna come prepped with tissues, no eyeliner,
Relax.
We'll
No,
laugh,
bye.
we'll
Or at least it
cry.
has to be, yeah,
Yeah,
waterproof, or you're gonna have to
waterproof, prep
raccoon
yourselves.
eyes.
It's gonna be fine. Maybe make yourself a cup of Tetley tea if you're in Newfoundland and Labrador. Get yourself a
Listen,
cup of tea. Be
hot
ready. If you're
day.
anywhere else in the world and you're checking this out, get yourself a beverage that you will enjoy
Hmm.
and that
Maybe some
will
hot
help you.
cocoa.
Yeah, hot cocoa.
Christmas.
It's winter. It's winter here. Yet there's no snow, and I'm okay with that. I'm not even gonna be
Yeah.
mad.
Nah.
But thanks for checking out the first part of what is going to be a very growth filled and courageous conversations for both of us. And we will
Well,
see you all in episode 2.
I love this. Thank you.